clergy in Russia? Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the carry-on drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to our latest edition of Views on the News. This is where we plumb the brain cells of wise and witty people to get their opinions about what has happened in the global atheist news the day before.
Okay, bye. I'll see you later.
So we've got with us today Guy Otten from Manchester and Tersia du Plessis from South Africa. Thank you for coming. So I've got a couple of things to start with for you. Before I've got a clip as well, but let's take a look at Uganda. You flagged this up last week, or maybe the week before, Tersia, because atrocities have been happening there. Nearly 40 pupils were killed at a school in western Uganda by rebels linked to the Islamic State group. They entered dormitories, setting fire to them, using machetes to kill and maim pupils. And it's down to the Allied Democratic Forces that's based in the Democratic Republic of Congo. They've been blamed, and a manhunt is underway for those guilty. But well, first thing that leaps out at me is this use of the word democratic. I know everybody aspires to have it in their title, but it's an abuse. There's nothing democratic about these organizations or countries.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's something that I always find problematic when we begin to use words without adhering to the proper meaning of them, because then the word democratic, it becomes meaningless, and that's just, it's dangerous, and it's also sad, and that's why I feel we should insist on calling organizations that don't adhere to the principles of their names. They should be called out, and we should accept and acknowledge that words have meaning, and we need to live according to the meaning of the words that we want to use. Otherwise, everything loses meaning, and then a democratic organization kills kids in a school with machetes.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is a problem with language generally, that people tend to use words to mean what they want them to mean. So I think that you know, it's always difficult. But what is sad here is that Uganda, which is has its problems and particularly has its issues around gay equality, is suffering from a spillover of the civil war and general disturbances and rioting and civil war and oppression and murdering that's going on in Congo, and has been for a long time. And what's interesting to me is that we've not heard of the Islamic State operating in the Congo, because Congo, I thought, was mainly a Christian or pagan or animist kind of country, and not a Muslim country. So to find that there are Islamic State people in Congo, that is news and worrying to me. And I think what's happening is that they've moved in to chaos and anarchy, and that's where they can thrive and survive.
Well, it's a big enough country with enough wild forest. I mean, the Congo is equatorial, so there's plenty of opportunity to hide there and use it as a base.
So on a more philosophical level, I'd like to say two things. The first is, I've often spoken about it, and I feel very strongly about one of the principles of humanism, in my opinion, is that we need to acknowledge that all of humanity is connected, and that we cannot just look after our own and ourselves. And there will be more refugees, and Europe can't sit still and say this is happening in Africa, and the Middle East can't say this is happening in Africa, because there will be repercussions. And the second thing is that if we don't work very hard to stabilize the developing world, then it gives a very easy foothold to extremist organizations like the Islamic State and other fundamentalist Christian organizations, because desperate people don't have the luxury of thinking about why they believe things and why they do things and how to do things. And I think that is something that needs to be addressed, because the opportunities created for extremist religious groups are just so much more apparent in destabilized social situations, because people latch onto religious beliefs when things are going hard. It just is a fact of human existence.
It's all they've got. But the thing is that there's a blurred line, isn't there, between this destabilized world and Western society. I mean, take Israel, for example. Which category would you put that in? Because last week, 6 Palestinians, including a 15-year-old boy, was killed by Israeli forces during a raid into the Jenin refugee camp. An Israeli helicopter fired missiles after Palestinian militants targeted troop carriers with explosives. The Israeli army said it had to mount a logistical operation under fire to remove several stranded vehicles. Now, that was early last week, and later last week, 4 people were killed and 4 more were wounded in shootings near the settlement of Ely in the West Bank. It was the deadliest attack on Israelis since January. Hamas, the Palestinian militant movement, claimed the gunmen as members, and calling the attack a natural response to the Israeli raid on Jenin a day earlier that left 6 Palestinians dead. So there you go. You've got one attack followed by another attack followed by the next. It's all about trying to get retribution and be the last person. It's not going to happen, is it?
It's like a feud between 2 families that goes on generation after generation and results in murder after murder after murder. It's like that, isn't it? It's and because the trouble is, it's nothing new. We've been this kind of stuff is going on all the time, and we, it's good that we notice it now, because it probably doesn't really hit our newspapers and our news reports that much.
Well, yes, that's why I do Global Atheist News.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and I think that the theological, the atheist aspect of this is the fact that Israel is motivated, at least in part, by a religious ideology.
Yeah.
But there are other factors as well too that make it more complicated. But yeah,
well, granted, yes. But the thing about a religious ideology is it's needless. Until there is any evidence for a God, there's no need to build a religion to worship one. All the other grievances are real, but that one isn't.
But then we are so clever that we begin to use the religion to justify beliefs and ideologies that we know actually have there's no more basis in the religion, but it's just so convenient. And we know that we can get support if we just press those buttons. And that's why I maintain that religion is dangerous, because it creates a button that is so easy to press. And
and some unscrupulous populist politicians will press that button.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, moving on to Canada. There is a Sikh commune, I suppose, or area in the Surrey city of British Columbia province. It's Punjabi dominated, and so it has the Sikh religion, and as a result of which some expatriate Indian Sikh leaders like to move there. So we had the Hardeep Singh Nijjar, who was a pro-Khalistan leader. Now, Khalistan is a would-be independent state for Sikhs based in India. But he's had to run away to Canada, where he has last week been shot.
Do we know who shot him?
Well, we don't, but he has been declared a wanted terrorist by the current Indian government, which, as you know, is mainly Hindu, due to his involvement in various acts of violence and subversive activities. So we have suspicions.
So what the suspicion is that this is an assassination by or on behalf of Indian special forces or something. If that's the case, this is getting far too common. We're having it. We're having it by the Israelis, by the Russians, by the Indians, and there's misbehavior by Chinese foreign embassies. We've been reading about. It's getting to be a major problem, and certainly we've had people Russian emigres assassinated in this country.
Yes,
we have
putting the lives of UK citizens at risk in the process.
Yes.
Well, that's true. Yeah,
indeed. Yeah. They weren't specifically of a religious nature, but Litvinenko, for example, was a political dissident. So it's a little bit different, but
the interesting thing is about Sikhism is that it was, as I understand it, originally, and I'm going to learn more about it because our next Northern Atheist meeting is going to be addressed by a Sikh. I believe it was founded as an attempt to build bridges between Hindus and Muslims. But of course, they famously carry a knife, and there is a military sort of kind of culture somewhere embedded as well.
Yes, it's a kukri knife, isn't it?
Well, is that the name of it?
I'm not sure. But welcome, Ty. Hello, Ty. Thank you for joining.
Hey, what's up?
Ty.
Hi, everyone.
Great. And Ty, we've moved on to an article about Warsaw in Poland, where the Pride Parade demanded equality for LGBT people ahead of the Polish elections. Now, this is interesting because the country currently has a right-wing government, which previously showed opposition to what it calls LGBT ideology. Not sure what that is, but they curried favor with their base supporters by opposing that. And so the march is against that historic attitude of their current government who's seeking re-election. Meanwhile, Warsaw's mayor, who belongs to the Liberal opposition party, has told the crowd that he was speaking to that the LGBTQ community will always be safe, and he hopes that they will always be safe in Poland. And this is pushing the current right-wing government, who wants to be re-elected, to soften their attitude. We want to say, we want to show they said that diversity, minority rights means Europe is open, Europe is tolerant. So what do you think about that? People will say anything when the election is imminent, won't they?
Yeah. My two thoughts would be it's always a good showing of a protest to demonstrate that the people do exist and that they're comfortable enough to show up in mass, but that it's not a riot, that they're just showing, hey, we are here and we demand a higher standard of representation, or at least recognition, because we're not going to be pushed aside. The other thing I'd throw out is I think more people would be shocked how, if they were to give themselves an opportunity to just look up the terms or the categories of sexual orientations, they would realize that they've given themselves a position by default without really considering what other options might better reflect where they're at. And it could be a similar thing how a lot of people say, oh, I'm Christian too, but they have vastly different interpretations of what they're talking about. I think being straight is actually most likely the minority. And the idea that there's different kinds of straight, like there are people who are sexual and straight, people who are asexual, and might have some inclination romantically for heterosexual partners, or both. And maybe like that proclivity would at least open people's minds up that LGBT is not like this scary fringe tidal wave coming, or something that you can put aside in a drawer and just say, it's its own different thing. It's just there are different people, and it's okay to be prideful for who you are, especially if it's not the thing that society wanted you to be or thought you were by default. And I think that's a good sign. So yeah, good job on the protest, good job being professional, and we need to continue to build more attitudes for people learning who they are so they can better identify with who they are, because that could help lead to a lot more better mental health for everybody.
Fighting against nature is bound to lose, isn't it? These parties that want to deny reality and try and gain popularity by their narrow view of what the world is like, how things work, surely they can't succeed.
Right.
I'd like them not to succeed anyway. Going to the UK, the Church of England has brought out a new compensation scheme for victims of abuse. Unfortunately, survivors waiting for years for redress say they hoped for more details on when the scheme will be rolled out, because it's supposed to be the most ambitious compensation scheme of its kind ever. And some of them fail. They might be re-traumatized by the application procedure.
I want to ask Guy, as a lawyer, and this is just a thought that popped into my mind right now. So I suppose it's fine to offer money as compensation, but how exactly does that work, and how does that prevent things like that happening in future? And what I'm just thinking is, how does money, I get if you have to go for counseling or so, then it can help you financially. But I mean, Guy, how do you speak to that as a lawyer, as in compensation for something like child abuse? It's just, I don't know if I should admire them or think it's just throwing money at a problem that can't really be solved by throwing money at it afterwards.
True. I mean, people who have suffered abuse, they often need prolonged counselling and care and treatment to help them to get beyond it. But the principle is basically around, you know, if the Church of England is sued, then a court would make a damages award. And so when there are large scale problems like this, the Church of England and other similar bodies set up compensation schemes and invite people to contact them, but they still need to go through some processes to try and ensure that this is a genuine claim. And the problem is that, you know, there's probably some freeloaders who think, oh yeah, I'll get in on that and say this, that, and the other happened, and get some money. So this is always a problem.
Yeah.
And that's possibly why the victims are saying it might be more traumatic to go through the whole process of proving that I was abused, that I'm not a freeloader who just wants money.
Yeah.
And that's why I have a very ambivalent feeling that, yes, it's fine to have this compensation scheme, but why don't you rather invest the funding in just not vetting the people better, or screening the people that you employ better, or instead of setting funds apart to rather to pay people afterwards, rather, well, obviously do that too, but it just feels to me as if it's not a solution to the problem.
I mean, the Church of England, I think, you know, obviously you're not hearing what the steps they are taking. They and pretty much the whole, every institution in England now has to have safeguarding measures, safeguarding people. People have to have their criminal backgrounds checked to make sure they're not paedophiles. There's a whole culture of that, and you know, I've just had to get another, we call it a DBS check, because I'm going into schools, not just as a humanist school speaker, but also as a faith and belief forum speaker. And so this is happening. But every school you go into, you know, there's a notice saying, you know, safeguarding officer is such and such a person. If you have a problem, talk to this person or that person. You know, this is the kind of thing that is embedded in culture now, and the Church of England certainly has all of that, and the Catholic Church, and pretty much every other institution.
It's got ludicrous. At one time, I had 3 DBS approvals, certificates to prove that I wasn't likely to be a risk to children, because I was a governor of a school, I was a director of a youth authority, of a youth club, and I was also a teacher, as a supply teacher going into schools. So I was the same person, but because I was in 3 jobs, I had to have three.
The only people who don't have to have DBS checks are parents, and I think that's a bit of an oversight, personally.
Yeah.
So that's terrible. That's a really dangerous system. That's a really dangerous system.
I absolutely agree.
But the idea that you can compensate for anything in money is ludicrous anyway, isn't it? I mean,
well, some things can. I mean, if somebody smashes my car up, you know, then a pot of money would enable me to buy another car. I mean,
this is abuse. This is psychology, isn't it?
Yeah,
you can't easily repair that. You can't even evaluate it in terms of pounds, can you?
No.
Or dollars.
But I mean, the legal system or the courts are required to try to do it.
Yes.
And you know, they have a go at it, and you know, there is a scale of. I mean, certainly when I was in law, you know, if you had one operation, it was so much. If you broke a leg, it was so much. You know, and then that was a starting point, and then it would be adjusted up or down.
Yes.
You know, depending on circumstances.
An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth.
Yes.
Well, we haven't had that system in this country for about 700 or 800 years, I think.
Yeah, that was a primitive early version. Yeah, but the thing about the Church of England is it's got even more ridiculous, because this compensation scheme was worked out by a panel of experts who provided independent oversight on how the church dealt with these accusations of abuse. And the Archbishop's Council have just confirmed that they were ending the contracts of all 3 of the board members on this panel. So apparently what's been happening is a couple of the panel members claimed that the church had refused to share data with them and denied them their own computers. And so they claimed that there'd been clear interference with their work and described working with church officials as an uphill battle. So unsurprisingly,
I'm shocked. I'm shocked they even have computers to begin with. That's a. You think they would just need scrolls or like a book that has information? Like, what are you looking up? That's
yes, I mean, the computers are not authorized in the Bible.
Right.
Yeah. So they've sacked the very body that was supposed to work out how to pay this compensation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, presumably they'll appoint fresh ones, but more compliant ones or something who won't ask for the data.
Yeah, maybe.
But I mean,
Anyway,
if you are if you're in that position, you do need information from various sources in order to assess the seriousness and the validity. For instance, if a claimant is saying, yes, I was abused by father such and such a person in 1968, in such and such a parish. Well, these people need to know, you need to have access to the church's records to check that priest was actually there, and whether and to look at his employment record to see if there's any actual evidence of other wrongdoing and things like that, in order to begin to sort of assess the the veracity of the claim.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is some good news though, because a recent poll, I'm not sure, from the World Values Survey, which is an international study conducted by the Policy Institute at King's College London, has come up with the following data. Fewer than half the people in the United Kingdom still believe in God. Let me show you a graph.
Ooh, data.
Look at that. Look at that. You see the going from 1981, when it was about 75% belief in God, to 2021, it's gone down to 49% belief in God.
I'm really confused by this. I'm really confused because then there would have to be people who believe in God, but half of them only believed in life after death. Like, I thought the grand motivator for a lot of people to maintain their God belief is to think that they live forever. That's shocking. So it's just a God that doesn't do anything for you even after you die. That's crazy, and you still can't do it again.
Yeah, I mean, but also in the last 5 years, it appears that belief in heaven and hell and the afterlife has gone up.
It's weird, isn't it? So there's been a downward trend, except for life after death. I think we all want a bit of that, but we don't really delve into how it's going to be provided so much. So
I mean, presumably the people who believe in life after death but don't believe in heaven and hell believe in things like reincarnation.
Yeah. I was attributing it to a different religion, but the idea that you would still believe in a God but not care about life after death, that seems to be like, for me, I find most people believe in God in order to get over the hang up of death, because it's a very uncomfortable thing for a lot of people, right? So like it's a very motivating factor to maintain belief in a higher power if you have a afterlife. And then you can add little fruits and flavors and color it with like volcanoes that spew out beer or 49 virgins or whatever you want to throw, whatever your flavor is. But when you take away, hey, there's no afterlife. By the way, keep tithing. Don't eat bacon. Don't drink on Sundays. It's like, why don't give me rules. This isn't a thing anymore. Like, a lot of people would just check out, but apparently not.
Don't wear a mixed fabric shirt.
Right. Yeah.
And don't pick up sticks on a Sabbath, for God's sakes.
That's an interesting point.
So
I'm just wondering, do you think God feels a bit sore that fewer people believe in his existence?
Yeah, I suspect there might not be a God.
Surely not. He didn't say that. Honest, he didn't.
Oh,
so this is interesting because if you break it down by age, look, you can see that those people who were born before the war or during the war, they've lost some of their belief in God. But baby boomers started out less believing and have gone down further, whereas Generation X and millennials, they seem to be going back up.
That is weird. I wonder if that's partly explained by the tough time they're having economically.
No, I actually have a serious hypothesis about that. I think that we are innately drawn to religious beliefs. There's very good evolutionary psychological reason to be convinced of that, I think, and we are not less inclined to believe in woo, as depending on generations, and because so many of these are my kids we're talking about, so I live with them, and they have the same human needs that we've had, and that the need that religions fulfill is still innate in the vast majority of people. And there's a lot of emphasis on the faith and spirituality as a cohesive, immersive experience with song and music and dance and theater. And that is having a real impact on young people. So that's I think it's that to me is something I've been picking up in my own kids and their generation. I think they're not trained to be, they didn't grow up religious, but they haven't been trained to be skeptics or critical thinkers. And therefore, when the religion is presented to them, packaged as a very nice social event with uplifting music, and then they fall for it to hook, line, and sinker, because they haven't been taught to be critical thinkers.
How can we get the message across that art is art and religion is religion? There's no connection.
No, there is a connection, John. There is a strong connection. Art is a deeply psychological experience, and such is religion. There is a connection. To most people, there is a very strong connection. We can make the disconnect, but most people don't.
I can throw a bone out to John, because what religion and art have in difference is identity. And I find like what religion offers is the benefits and the psychological impacts that you get from art, but along with that, an identity. And when everyone around you seems to have an identity, it makes you feel like you need to have one too. And what religion offers is something that's nice, compact, that seems to have a very low bar of entry and already has a lot of benefits and pros if you join up. But they don't see the near parasitic attachment and of what you offer them versus what they can offer you, and the binds that make it hard to leave. In a less extreme example, it's why some people enjoy Apple products. And you're like, wow, Apple products make this great phone. You just buy into this contract. Next thing you know, you're tied into an ecosystem.
Excuse me, I'm an Apple girl.
Yeah, I know exactly. The identity that comes with it. And then next thing you have a laptop that connects to your TV, and you're like, oh, this is great, but you can't buy another TV. And so when they come up with another update, you're like, oh, it would be nice to have this thing. Was like, you can't have that thing because Apple doesn't give that to you. It's like, oh, well, it must be a bad thing then. And next thing you know, you just have like this culture of people who are just like Apple. And then when your webcam stops working, you're like, oh, well, it's my fault because I didn't buy the latest Apple product. That's my problem.
Well, that would be great. That would be a very powerful argument if it wasn't the case that Apple is better.
You see that? You see that?
Okay. Well, I wanted to see this last slide because that was a global survey. Take a look at this. Now, look at that. Nigeria, 94% religious. Going down, United Kingdom, 33% religious.
Where's my country on the list?
Ah, you don't count.
Oh, damn.
United States, 58% religious. So we've got some way to go yet.
Yeah, what does the white space mean? For instance, in Japan and Egypt, there's a space of a white. What's that about? I wonder.
Not declared.
No, could be. Yeah, but it's quite interesting how South Korea has so many atheists. That's pretty impressive.
I would like to know how they're distinguishing not religious versus atheist. Because
yes, I think that's a good question.
And there's no, when you have a absolute such as you either are religious or not religious, right? Like there's no middle ground. And a lot of times people think that atheism is like this weird extra leg of not believing in a God. But no, if you don't believe in a God, if you're not religious, if you don't have any if you don't believe any religious claims or theistic claims, guess what? You're an atheist. Also, on the flip side, if you are religious and you believe in one God, you're atheist to all the other gods. So you're also an atheist too. So what's the dirty word behind that? The only
I'm pretty skeptical about this alleged this finding that more than 50% of the UK population don't believe in a God, because I think the vast majority, not the vast majority, huge number, probably possibly a majority, are just not interested in religion. And if you ask them, they will and ah and say maybe they do, but they're not sure. And do you know what I mean?
I guarantee you, no one on this chart ever burned a goat or sacrificed it.
Yeah, not guilty.
God is not happy with the number of wishy-washy Christians that exist today. I think he's probably washed his hands and just like,
Well, certainly in the Old Testament, God seemed to like the smoke that came up from burnt offerings of some sort or another.
Yes, made that very clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, the smell of cooking.
Well, guys, I just have to. We've got to. I'm going for 4 more minutes. No, 7 more minutes, because the smell of my burnt flesh is enticing me to go to my plate.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to play a short clip of an incident that I'm sure you'll love, because there was in an American church, there was a substitute pastor who came along and had to, because the regular pastor wasn't available, and he took communion. It was a Roman Catholic church, obviously, and he claims that, they give out these wafers, which they call the host, because it's supposed to be the body of Christ. Woo! And he claims that there was a Eucharistic miracle because they ran out of hosts, and then suddenly the container filled up again. Woohoo! Take a look at this.
We had something happen. It's hard to say, actually.
Oh.
God provides, and it's funny how God provides. Sometimes it comes in a weird way, in a mystical way, in a strange way. And one of our Eucharistic ministers was running out of hosts, and yet they didn't. And suddenly there was more hosts in the Ciborium. Just God duplicated himself in the Ciborium. It's God provides. It's strange how God does that. And it happened. And it was noted by one of our Eucharistic ministers that was giving out communion to you guys today. It's really, really cool when God does those things. And it's really, really cool when we realize what he's done. And it just happened today. Very powerful, very awesome, very real, very shocking, but also it happens. It happens. And today it happened.
Do you think it really happened, guys? Do you think it was really real? Do you think, are you convinced?
I'm not convinced, because my experience of Catholicism is that there are always spare hosts that have been consecrated in the tabernacle, and so it's just a question of getting some more out. and they could have easily done that. So I think that I suspect this was a priest trying to impress rather than a genuine miracle. I mean, what's more likely, that he's lying or that the laws of physics are set aside?
Oh, you're such a skeptic, Guy.
Well, I'd like to say that even if that were a miracle, I think in more literal ways, if there was suddenly enough bread to feed the millions of hungry people, then that would have been a miracle. To create a few paper-thin wafers, even if there was a God, and even if he created, if that's the best miracle that the Almighty God can perform, I mean, really? It's in my opinion, but maybe it's because I'm just a nobody from a third world country. But that's just a very paltry miracle in my book. But maybe it's just
the miracles aren't that impressive. I got to be honest with you.
I wouldn't call you a nobody from a third world country, Tersia.
But the thing is,
that's a first world miracle. You know, that's a first world problem. Yes.
Yeah, the problem is, like, you have so much manna that you can spend, and God used up all the manna at the beginning of the Bible when he was raining and flooding the entire planet or splitting the oceans. He's like, cool, I'm going to do this through the whole... Oh, I'm out of manna. Okay, geez, I'm going to have to rest for like 4,000 years. And now he's just waiting up for the next one. So it's like, what? Jesus comes down. It's like, what can I do? You can turn water into juice. Okay, that's cool.
And those poor children in Sudan. I mean, really?
Yeah, exactly.
I'll do Eucharist wafers in America, but the starving kids in Sudan, not today. Huh.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I want to impress a few Americans. I don't want to save dead children or dying children in Sudan.
Yeah. Well, not to mention, the war in Ukraine, the massacre in Uganda, etc., etc.
And the misogyny in Afghanistan and Iran. Yeah. Let's just make a few wafers to impress Americans.
Yep, gullible Americans. Sorry, Dr. Ty.
Don't sweat.
He's not in that category.
No, he's not, but he's an American.
Guys, thank you very much. It's been wonderful, and we've run out of time, so I'm going to play the outro. Wave goodbye to everyone, and thank you for watching.
Goodbye.
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the carry moon drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys?